San Juan families, and welcome to Supporting Literacy and Read Aloud at Home. I'm Cheryl Adler-Walls, and I'm a Family and Community Engagement Specialist with Scholastic and your host for today's webinar. Our outcomes for today is for you to understand the stages of reading development and for you to explore reading concepts that your family can focus on at home to do with your child to support each stage of reading development. Today's focus really is for children ages birth through late elementary. I have a question to get us started. Do you believe what you do at home impacts your child's academic growth? Think about that for a moment. I really hope you said yes, because the research is clear that what you do at home is actually more impactful than what we sometimes do at school. And this is where the research is from. It's from a new wave of evidence. And in short, they said when schools, families, and community groups work together to support learning, children tend to do better in school. They tend to stay in school longer, and they like school more. And what you do at home has a lasting impact on our children. So keep doing what you are doing. In fact, what you do at home with reading aloud and reading to your children has lasting benefits. Let's take a look at what some of the benefits are. We know that reading to your children and reading with your children really increases fluency. That's how well they're reading. It helps build their vocabulary, the words that they are learning, and it helps build comprehension, being able to understand what they are reading. It also strengthens their imagination and curiosity and creativity. We know that when we read books with our children and to our children, it takes them to different places and imagination. We also know that when we read to and with our children, it develops that love of reading. It creates routines and traditions. Some of you might sit down at particular times of the day, have certain routines with reading, and that really does help. We know that routines really do help our children. And we know it provides an opportunity to model reading behaviors and skills that they might not get otherwise. So we appreciate all that you do when you read to and with your children. And we know that it promotes time to really bond with your child. It's a special time. So no matter who is reading to and with your child, that bond is formed. Let's take a look at this chart. What a difference it makes just reading to and with your child 20 minutes a day. Take a look at student A, student B, and student C. And you can see what a difference 20 minutes versus 5 minutes a day versus 1 minute a day will take in the amount of words they will hear versus the amount of hours they will have read, and just the impact that it might have on standardized scores when they take their tests in the upper grades. As you can see, it'll have a lasting effect on your child. So even reading at home, just 20 minutes a day, will make a huge impact, a huge difference. So we will aim towards that 20 minutes a day. When you read aloud and do activities at home with your child, it supports the science of reading pillars that your child's teacher is actually working on at school. You might have heard about these pillars of reading from your child's teacher, but just in case you haven't, we'll go through them really quickly. We know that when you read aloud to and with your child, we know that it develops phonemic awareness. That's really the ability to identify and play with individual sounds and spoken words. It involves really understanding that spoken words are made up of those smaller units of sound and really being able to manipulate those sounds. We also know that reading to and with your child really helps with phonics, understanding how those letters and groups of letters really come together and link together to form words. And those sound letter relationships, those patterns that come together that form words. We know that when words are put together, they become sentences, and sentences become paragraphs, and paragraphs become pages, and that helps with the fluency. Fluency is the ability to read words and phrases and sentences and stories correctly with enough speed and expression. So when you read to and with your child, you are really modeling that fluent readers read automatically. They read with meaning. They recognize words without having to decode them. So that's what you are modeling when you read to and with your child. Vocabulary is also an important part of reading to and with your child. It encompasses knowing what different words mean and how to say them and how to use them correctly. And last but not least, we have comprehension. That's really involving understanding what you are reading, making connections between words and background knowledge and experiences. Effective comprehension really requires the reader to engage in a variety of different processes, including activating our prior knowledge, making predictions, asking questions, including inferencing and summarizing. All those things go into comprehension. And you're doing those things automatically when you're reading to and with your child. We know that children go through different stages of reading development at different times. This is just an idea that is taken and adapted from Shaw's stages of development. You can take a look at this, and we're also going to provide this handout for you so that you can take a look at it. But please remember, this is just an idea of where your child might develop. Remember that every child is unique, every child is different. So while you might have a novice reader at ages 4, you might also have a novice reader at age 10. It all depends on where your child is developmentally. But we are going to be going through each of these different ages and stages of reading development again, just looking at what you can do to help support each stage in its development as your child goes through them. So please take note, as we said before, you can use these developmental stages as just a guide. They might not match your child's age or grade, and that is completely okay. You will find some of the ideas that we're sharing today useful in terms of where your child is at today, but you might want to put them away for tomorrow's ideas, right? And also, you might want to use them with even some of your younger children who might already be at those stages. Remember that every child might be above or below each of the stages that we are talking about. Just like thinking about how your child walks. Some of your child developmentally learned early, some of your children learned a little bit later in life, and that's okay. Some of us do it at different levels. So that's where we are, and that's where we're going to be today. Where your child is at developmentally with reading is where they will start. So that's what we'll want to do is take a look at where each of your children are at in their stages and go from there. Support where they are at. So let's take a look at this first stage. This is what we call the emergent or pre-reader stage. Typically, this happens all the way from birth or around 6 months, all the way up to 6 years old, preschool, pre-K. And I'll let you take a look at some of the things we tend to see during these stages, such as pretending to read, kind of naming the letters, recognizing some signs. I know sometimes our children recognize the Starbucks signs or the McDonald's signs, right? They sometimes play with books or pencils. These are some of the things that we tend to see in the emergent pre-reader stage. What is it that we can do to really support the pre-reader stage at home? Well, one of the things that we talked about is that phonemic awareness stage, really listening to those sounds. So we want to support emergent readers at home by really playing with sounds. So one of the ways we can do that is sounding out and just listening to sounds with syllables. Those are the bits and pieces of sounds that we hear in words. So we can clap out the syllables in words. For example, let's try the first picture is an apple. Let's clap that out together. Apple. As we can hear, it has two parts. Apple. The next one is a little bit harder. Sometimes we say crayon, but actually it's crayon. Let's try that one together. Crayon. The next one is a little bit easier. That one is bus. Let's try that one together. Bus. Can you think of some other words at home that you can clap out the syllables to or the sound bits to? I bet you can. Look around the room and see what words you can clap out the syllables to support those units of sound or syllables that you can do with your emergent readers. Another thing that we can do with playing with sounds is rhyming. Rhyming is fun to do with your children, but sometimes can be confusing. For example, we would give a thumbs up or thumbs down if these two words rhyme. Let's listen in. Pig and wig. Pig and wig. Now, rhyming words have the same ending. Do pig and wig have the same ending? Yes, they do. Those two rhyme. Let's try another one. Bear and bone. Bear and bone. Oh, your children might say yes. But remember, we're not listening for beginning sound. We're listening for the end. Do they rhyme? Bear and bone. No, they do not. They do not rhyme. Let's try another one. Bone and bone. Bone and bone. Yes, they do. Those two rhyme. Can you think of some other words that you might want to rhyme at home? Maybe some colors. Red and bed. Red and bed. Those two would rhyme as well. Again, with emergent readers, we want to work on bits of sound, developing that phonemic awareness. We have to remember with our emergent readers at home, the most important thing to do is read aloud with them and to them. We should begin reading aloud with them from birth on. Remember that reading aloud with them and to them feeds the child's hungry brain with data for language development, for speaking and early word learning. It's a wonderful way to bond with your child, as we said before. A couple things to remember is to remember that start that reading habit early. Find a time during the day where you could all settle down with a great book. Maybe it's after dinner. Maybe it's before dinner. Maybe it's right when you get home from work. Maybe it's even as you're going someplace and someone's driving you someplace and you can settle down in the back of the car, right, to do that. Maybe it's right before bed. Another thing to remember is that if you speak another language, make sure that you are also reading in all the languages that you know, your native language. So if Spanish is your first language, please be sure to read with your children in your first language. Many second language families believe that they should only read to their child in English because they are not confident in speaking in English. They think, "Oh, I need to speak with my children in English so that they learn that." But many, many, many vocabulary words and many habits can be formed when you're speaking your native language as well. And remember, you can read anytime, anywhere. Find out what works best for you and go from there. Let's move on to the second stage, and that is the novice reader. Again, it might start at age 6 to 7, first grade into early second grade. Again, it might start earlier for your child, and it might start later. This is when your children are starting to master the relationship between letters and sounds. That's the phonics part. They're connecting the print and spoken words. They're able to recognize those high fluency words, or sometimes we call them sight words. They're able to sound out those one syllable texts, and they're able to master written letters. So what can we do to really support our novice readers at home? Let's take a look. One of the best ways to support novice readers at home is through developing those mastery of high frequency words. I've given you a set of words at the link right there. You can look at those. Those are what we call the fry words, or you can use the QR code. Use your phone, take out your phone, and go ahead and download that list. Novice readers begin to build their memory bank through the recognition of high frequency words. High frequency words are those words that we see all the time in text. The, is, than, her, is, but. All those words that we see over and over again. As you can see in the pictures, you can play lots of different games. Maybe write the high frequency words on different cards. You can turn them over to match them, like you see the boys and girls playing here. Can you think of some other games that you can use? Maybe any kind of matching games, taking turns like a go fish game, any kind of games that you can think of. Maybe even playing I Spy. Maybe put them around the whole house. I spy the word it. Or even looking for those high frequency words in books. Again, whatever games you can play to really learn these high frequency words are the best thing that you can help support those novice readers. Another way to support our novice readers, as we said, is they're learning phonics. And phonics is all about word families. So we're going to look at how do we form word families? How many words can we make with different word endings? So our novice readers should really consider those spelling patterns. For example, AY, A, and AT, which is at. So can you think of all those words that have the ending sound or the ending A? And maybe have your child write as many words as they can. And then have a little competition. How many words can you write with at? And see how many they can write with that. Maybe have two of your children doing it at the same time. How many can do AY, and how many can do at, and see who can come up with at the most, who can come up with more words than the other. Or maybe you can find them in books. There are all kinds of different word endings besides AY and AT. Those are called word families. And again, the QR code will give you ideas of all the different word families that our typical first and second grade teachers use to teach word families. And again, you can use that QR code to download those different words. Again, come up with as many games as you can to really work on those word families. Again, supporting our novice readers at home is really all about reading aloud. That's the most important thing, reading to and with your child. Some of the ideas that we have are taking picture walks through picture books, looking at the cover, guessing what the book is going to be about. That's moving into the comprehension piece. Turning to the pages to learn a little bit about the characters, and thinking about what the book, what might be happening in the book. Again, we're not just focusing on just word families and phonics, we're also now leaning into that comprehension piece. We also want to make sure that this isn't a time to be shy. We also want to work on that fluency piece. So really encourage you to read with expression. Use your voice to reflect the different changes in character and the mood of the story. This is a great time for your inner actress or actor to come out. And of course, read more than books. Flyers, menus, recipes, packages, they're all available for you and your child to read together. So think about all those different things you can read as a novice reader. They're all out there for your child to read. So just go out and find them. Our next stage is the decoding reader. Typically, this happens between ages 7 and 9 in second and third grade. Again, this is where we're transitioning from really learning how to read to learn. So moving away from so much of the phonics and reading aloud into really to that fluent reading. So again, reading simple and familiar stories to really increase that fluency, decoding more of the words with success, really mastering those high frequency words that we talked about, those sight words, connecting our meaning to familiar words, so I understanding what I'm reading, and really having a wide variety of instructional materials that we're reading in school, but also really understanding what our independent reading level is. So I'm picking books, I'm choosing books wisely. I know where my independent reading level is, I know what instructional level I have at school, and I'm picking those books wisely. One of the things that you can do at home with your decoding reader is really not giving in all the time to giving them the words. So think about this. How do you support your child when they come home and they get stuck on a word? What do? Do you just automatically give them the word? Well, here's something to think about. A good rule of thumb is only offer correction when it changes the meaning of the sentence. So if your child is going along and they're reading and they don't necessarily read it totally correct, only offer correction when it totally changes the meaning of the sentence. Also, provide help only when asked. Once they have a little bit of struggle and they try to do it themselves, and maybe they ask, of course, you can help with that. When it's a new vocabulary word, So maybe your child is struggling with a word because they don't even know what the word is. And offer assistance by providing what that word means. And also, when your child is struggling to the point of frustration, when they get to a word and they absolutely don't know what it is, we don't want them to get upset and just really fall back and say, I'm not going to do this anymore. We want to make sure that we provide them the help that they need. One of the things that we do with supporting decoding readers at home, again, it's all about that fluency and really listening to that model fluent reading, is we love audiobooks for that. Those are the books that we can listen to at home. Again, these audiobooks are available in libraries. They're available online. They're available at school. They're available on YouTube, you name it. And they're great because our readers hear those sound effects. They hear the voices of the character. They hear modeled fluent reading. It really allows our children to keep the longer focus on the reading, which is great. It gives them the stamina for the listening and reading. They can follow along if they have the book right with them. They can follow along visually. And they may be able to access text that may be too challenging to read on their own. So, in other words, I might really want to read a book that's too difficult for me to read on my own. But if I listen into it on an audio, I will be able to enjoy it on my own. Or maybe as a family, I'll be able to listen in onto that book as well. Our last stage of readers that we're going to be talking about today is the fluent reader. Again, this is kind of our last stage that we're talking about later elementary, ages 9 through 14, maybe even into middle school. This is 4th through 8th grade, where again, reading is not just reading to, we're not learning to read, we are reading to learn. We're reading about to gain new ideas, we're reading to learn new attitudes, we're reading to gain knowledge. Sometimes our children are going into those context areas in middle school. I'm learning about science, I'm learning more about social studies. I'm reading a variety of texts with lots of success. I'm not just reading fiction now, I'm reading nonfiction, I'm reading magazines, I'm reading biographies, I'm reading all different kinds of texts with success. One of the important things we can do at home is help support that conversations around comprehension. Remember, comprehension is when we understand what we are reading. Most of us agree that comprehension just doesn't magically happen. We have to use a wide variety of strategies to really assist in understanding what we are reading. It's really important, just like riding a bike, we have to practice and encourage our children to really read at home and really understand and use those strategies. So here are 4 different strategies that we can focus on in terms of comprehension. We can focus on predicting. Predicting is really thinking about what is going to happen based upon what you've read in a text, maybe even looking at the illustrations. The next one is making connections. What do you already know about the topic? Maybe using some of your background knowledge. That's why it's so important as a family that not only are you providing some reading experiences, that you're providing worldly experiences as well. Getting out there in your neighborhoods, going to see different things that sometimes don't even cost any money, right? Getting out there in nature, getting out there and seeing museums, providing your children with lots of different connections that they might be able to connect to within a book. The next one's visualizing. What sights, what sounds, what smells, what do you imagine as you're reading the story? And last but not least, it's summarizing. How would you retell the story in your own words? So again, to really help practice these different comprehension strategies, while you're reading with your children or your children are reading to you, you can ask these questions before, during, and after with your children. We provided this read aloud tip sheet in English and in Spanish for you. So again, when we look at this tip sheet, you can see that we provided questions around predicting, around making connections, around visualizing, and around summarizing. For today, let's just take a look at our predicting. For example, you might use some of these questions before you start reading. You might use some of these questions during the time that you're reading, and you might ask some of these questions after you are reading. So, for example, if we use this the first question, looking at the title, the cover, and the illustrations are the pictures. What do you think will happen in this book? That is a question that you might ask before you even begin reading a book. Just looking at it, right? Just looking at the cover. The next one, what do you think will happen when I turn the page? That is a question you can ask at any time. What do you think will happen next in the story? Again, that is a question you can ask at any time during the story. How do you think the story will end? Again, that is a question that you can use towards the end of the story. How do you think the character will handle the situation? This is a very specific question. Maybe there's a situation in the plot of the story that's happening, and you want to ask that specific question to your child. And the last one is all a question that you can use at the very end. If the story had a sequel, that means another story, what do you think it would be about? Again, these are all about predicting. What do you think might happen? There's a set of questions for making connections, a set of questions for visualizing, and a set of questions for summarizing. Again, they're in English and in Spanish. So if we take a look at this example, here's a story. It's called Are We There Yet? By Bridget Taylor and illustrated by Ethan Long. You might use this book and you might say, hey, let's look at the title. Let's look at the cover. What do you think will happen in this book? What do you think is going to happen? And hopefully your children can look at the title and the cover and say, oh, what do you think is going to happen? And they'll be able to answer you. And if they don't, provide them a little bit of support. Maybe take a look at the characters. What do you think is going to happen with, who do you think that might be? Is that the mom? Is that the dad? Who is that? Is that little brother or sister? What do you think is going to happen? And then another question might be, where do you think the story takes place? And again, if your child doesn't quite understand that question, offer some support. What kind of clothes are they wearing? What do you think that those kind of clothes might provide some context of where they are at? So again, offering that support again with your child of expanding their mind of what they think is going to happen. So thinking about what other prediction questions could you ask just by looking at the cover. So I'm going to be quiet for a moment and think about what other questions might you ask. I might ask a question about the main characters. I might ask a question about why do you think the character in the middle is not as happy? Those might be some questions that you may ask. Again, these are all about predicting, but try some of those other questions as well. So today, we took you through all the different stages of our readers. We also talked about the importance of reading aloud to and with your children, and how important that is to the development of your child's reading, their growth, vocabulary, comprehension, all of those things. So I ask you, what are you most excited about trying with your child? I hope that you'll try one of these ideas that we have. Maybe one of these ideas sparked something new for each one of you to try with your children. And share these ideas with others that you know. On behalf of Scholastic and myself, I want to thank you for being here today to learn more about how you can support your children's literacy and read aloud at home. And remember, the single most important activity for building knowledge, the knowledge required for eventual success in reading, is reading aloud to and with your child. Thank you for all that you do.